LS&J's Poverty Research Institute recently released a new report called True Poverty: What It Takes to Avoid Deprivation in the Garden State. The centerpiece of this new study is the data-driven finding that true poverty in a high cost of living state like New Jersey averages 300%, or triple the official federal income calculations for what constitutes poverty. The federal poverty level is based on an outdated formula that undercounts poverty in our state. The formula was developed in 1963 when an employee of the Social Security Administration developed a simple equation. She started with a family's food budget using the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Thrifty Food Plan, a subjective measure, even then, for the types and amounts of food needed for adequate nutrition. She simply multiplied the amount by 3 to account for all other essential expenses. This became the basis for the calculation of the federal poverty level, or FPL. Other than updating for inflation, the formula remains the same today nearly 60 years later. This outdated, inaccurate, and unrealistic measure is the income threshold used by the federal government to measure poverty and determine eligibility for government aid programs. True Poverty Report addresses the shortcomings of the FPL and establishes a vastly broadened, cost-based methodology to determine the real extent and plight of New Jerseyans living in deprivation or true poverty. What is the true poverty level? True poverty level is the bare minimum income families need to survive, without taking help from family, friends, neighbors, or the government. It is based on the actual cost of 7 basic needs: housing, childcare, food, health, transportation, and taxes. A small amount is also set aside for essential miscellaneous items such as cleaning supplies and toiletries. True poverty level costs are differentiated by county, number of family members, and ages of children. The FPL, on the other hand, fails to consider significant costs incurred by working families, such as childcare and transportation. The FPL fails to adjust for regional differences in the cost of living. It remains the same whether one lives in Mississippi, New York City, or Princeton. In reality, costs vary within states and within counties. The FPL has failed to keep up with the cost of living. In 2019, a 3-person family with 2 children in New Jersey was considered living below the FPL if the combined annual household income fell below $20,598. In the same year, the median gross rent for a 2-bedroom unit was $17,316. This means that a family in that 2-bedroom unit would use 84% of its gross income just for housing. In 1960, the FPL for the same size family was $2,654. Median gross rent was $888, or only 33.5% of the total budget. Clearly, the federal poverty measure no longer accurately represents the true cost of living in New Jersey. Why does it matter? Relying on a flawed measure of poverty leaves millions without assistance, exposing them to enduring and life-threatening consequences of poverty. Without an accurate measure, we cannot adequately develop policies to assist people experiencing deprivation. As noted, our report finds that New Jerseyans need at least 300% FPL, or 3 times more than the income levels the federal poverty measure defines as poverty. This is the rock bottom for working families to survive with dignity and without public or private support. The federal poverty threshold grossly understates the income required to avoid deprivation in New Jersey. For instance, a family of 3, 1 adult, 1 school-aged child, and 1 preschooler needs an average of $70,372 annually to pay necessary bills, not $20,598 set forth by the FPL. Statewide TPL averages range from $31,995 for a single adult household to $99,112 for a 5-person family with 1 preschooler and 2 school-aged children. Even working families are trapped in true poverty in the state because of high costs and low wages. Even before COVID-19, There were nearly 3 million residents, or about a third of the state's population, living in deprivation or below the true poverty level income thresholds, although only 800,000 were recognized as living in poverty by the FPL. Based on the federal poverty level, 9.2% of New Jerseyans live in poverty in 2019. However, in the reality based on the TPL, more than 33% of the state's residents live in deprivation in 2019. The official poverty measure grossly understates poverty in New Jersey. To view a TPL budget calculator by county, family size, and ages of children, a detailed methodology of our study, and to learn more about PRI, visit www.lsnj.org/PRI.